often prides, we think about them as like these huge fun parties, but like some people, that is the only day that they will be in contact with a direct resource or service. It is the only day.
Hello, my LGBTQs, and welcome back to another episode of A Jaded Gay. I'm Rob Lovelace, and today I'm a non-jaded gay just because I've been feeling super productive lately, and like I've just been getting a lot of like podcast work stuff done. Like, you know that montage in Legally Blonde when she has the rough beginning at Harvard, and then she, wears her bunny costume to the computer store and buys a new computer. You hear that Watch Me Shine song play in the background, and she's kicking butt studying while working out and getting things done and finding her place at school. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt lately. I mean, no bunny costume, but I definitely have just been like charging through putting together podcast scripts, getting things done around the house, planning ahead. So I feel super productive. That being said, I am still like passing out on the couch at 5 p.m. fully exhausted, but work hard, sleep hard. And speaking of shining, happy Pride, everyone. We are here. It is our time to celebrate. Just a reminder that it is important to remember LGBTQ plus causes and history year round, not just at Pride. So let's have those rainbows visible 365 days a year. And on the topic of rainbows, I am super excited for today's guest. We are going to be talking about how there's been some divide over how members of the LGBTQ plus community view Pride should be celebrated. And as part of that, how we can build a more inclusive Pride for all. So we're going to get into it, but first, let's pull the tarot. And how exciting, we are kicking off Pride Month with a major arcana card. We pulled Strength in reverse. Strength is the number 8, which represents progress and decisive action. Also, the number 8 is similar to the infinity sign, which we also see on this card. So it's a reminder that our energy and magic is constantly flowing through us. Now, when we draw this card in reverse, we may be feeling a lack of self-confidence or like we don't trust ourselves. So we need to remind ourselves that our core strength is always with us and that it's time to reconnect with it. This card is also a call to action to return to being heart-centered and to show ourselves kindness. We need to remember to take care of ourselves so that we can recharge our energy levels. And through these actions, we can revitalize our courageousness to endure and overcome future obstacles. So with that in mind, I am very excited to welcome our next guest. They are the executive director of the radical social justice organization, Galaei. Please welcome Tyrell Brown. Hi, Tyrell. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Rob? Nice to meet you officially.
Nice meeting you too. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting episode. I'm glad to have you on to talk about a very important topic. But before we do that, can you kind of tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, how you identify, your pronouns, all that fun stuff?
Of course. Yeah. So my name is Tyrell Brown. I am the executive director at Galaei and the president and program director of Philly Pride 365. I use they, them pronouns. And, Philly Pride 365 was really born out of a desire to make sure that Pride was being seen and lifted up all year round. And Galaei was the perfect place to do that because our mission is already centered in serving and resourcing the least and the most marginalized in our community, particularly brown and Black, queer, and trans folks. So it really was a perfect place to kind of bring, large scale programming and really add other layers to it, because what we do is we pride ourselves as, providing an apparatus at Pride that's just really a valve to make sure that our community gets resourced that day. And that's, not just the implicit resource that it is being with community for the day, goofing off, dancing, stages, sound, and all the art that's getting displayed and shared. But also it's about getting, life-saving resources into people's hands too, and really working over the past year to implement a systemic approach to this. So that way, people are not just getting joy and experiencing joy that day. They're also walking away with like a tangible resource. And we learned that really through the pandemic, and coming out of the pandemic, and really people not engaging in wellness initiatives the way we would like them to, simply because there's other socioeconomic factors that are preventing them from doing so or acting as a barrier to them doing so. So, very much like, you don't get your Mpox, vaccination, and because it doesn't make sense if you can't feed food in the cupboard, right? It doesn't make sense even if you're lonely. There is a epidemic of loneliness that I think exists in all communities, but specifically in marginalized communities. So we really pride ourselves in kind of bridging all of those things to create a safety net to serve community, and using pride as sort of it's like the camel that carries it through the desert, right? So, and I think that's really what the mission was when I first, singularly took the reins of it, to make sure that those things were going to continue to happen for years to come.
And I'm really excited to talk more about Galaei's resources for the LGBTQ plus community. Before we get into that, though, I do like to ask all my guests, are you a jaded or non-jaded gay today, and why?
You know, I'm a non-jaded gay. I think in general, I'm a Leo fire sign, so I am pretty like, it's weird, like I'm silly and I'm fun, but I'm also um very serious. So I'm not jaded, and I don't really land on like the cynical side of things. I am wholly like mission driven constantly. You can't tell jokes around me without me going like, that's true, but according to. So, because I always am my life right now. My life right now is really about resourcing and serving community. And I don't get to put that down, even when I'm just like hanging out, at a local bar or what have you with friends. It's like, I can't take the hat off, because oftentimes you just never know. I've had people come up to me with ideas for things that they want to co-create or co-collaborate on. But I've also had people come up to me and like go like, hey, I have this friend who needs, right? So, and that's not even talking about my DMs. Like, so it's like there's always an opportunity to resource others. So it's kind of keep that like levity there, and that silliness, but I'm kind of always, figuring out the problem, which is, which is in my head right now. I'm laughing because I'm like, oh my God, I'm really like that. It's like describe me to myself. So,
Well, I love the energy you're bringing, and it ties perfectly, actually. The tarot card we pulled today is Strength, which is tied to Leo. So I think the energies just match up perfectly for this.
there we go. Yes.
So, with that being said, you kind of touched upon it briefly in your introduction, but can you tell the listeners about Galaei and your work with the organization?
Yeah. So, interesting story. My start here at Galaei. So, I actually, for very many years of my life, didn't really work in nonprofits. I actually, am an early childhood education teacher. So I've taught everything from, preschool to kindergarten readiness, even some kindergarten, first and second grade as well. Especially during the pandemic, when we just had to smash classrooms together as much as possible to make sure students were resourced. And then through that, I also started doing children's programming for the Trans Wellness Conference. And so I built a familiarity, with programming. So I was already queer and already Black. So I was, but this was like, how do I operationalize these other layers into actual programming? And so working with the Trans Wellness Conference, especially dealing with such a vulnerable population. And I always tell people like the most marginalized population on the planet are children. They are taken advantage of, used as tokens, and, really systemically abused and discarded in ways that, we all are familiar with to some degree, but it's kind of like they're implicitly discounted in so many ways by our systems, right? So, seeing that and operating within that lens at the Trans Wellness Conference first really gave me my key into like, oh my God, you can turn the light on and keep the light on and ignite it in children just by providing a space for them to be free and to be liberated and to be joyful, right? And then like that really kind of borne out the next steps in this. I then after that was still teaching throughout that time, but then I decided to run for office, right? And let's just say, like, everyone, if you know a friend that's running for office, check on them, right? Because it is a very daunting experience. It challenges every principle that you have. There's a difference between being an activist and being a politician, right? You really have to navigate those things delicately and treat yourself with care, which is what I learned. But then I was that summer, before I had announced to run, I was asked by the former executive director here to come and help them at the organization cultivate their first camp for queer and trans kids here at Galaei. So they contracted me to come in to help co-develop the programming for it. It was successful. It was fun. Got to meet the staff for the first time. And really, it was just a good summer. It was a really good, fun summer. And one of the staff there was like, you should apply for this position. It's opening up. And so I did. And originally, I did not get the position. I was told that there was three of us that scored equivalent to one another in the top three, but I was running for office, and they were like, what if you actually win though? Like, we're not going to do an employee search in like 5 months or something like that again. And then one of the other applicants then subsequently a few weeks later decided to drop out and I guess retain the position that they were already in. And they gave me a call and they were like, so would you consider? And then that's how I started here at Galaei. And coming from a classroom is very different. So I was in a classroom, it's very routine, and, you do, math at 10 a.m. and then there's snack and then we go outside and then you come back in. It's very formulaic step by step, right? Whereas like working in an administrative capacity is like, I was like, what is this? Right? Like, I don't know if I'm actually working right now because it doesn't feel like I have a task or a roadmap in front of me. But I've always been an organizer. So I was like, I had organized in grassroots capacities, first for Bernie Sanders campaign. Incidentally, in 2020, we started this grassroots startup in Philadelphia called Philly for Bernie, which is really what sort of like reignited that like activist child that I was when I was in my early 20s and late teens. And what happened is like, I don't know, it just like lit a fire within me because I was running around for free, uncompensated, like running around the city of Philadelphia, really kind of moving events and such along for the campaign, so much so that the second week of the pandemic, and I'll never forget this, it was like, that second week where we're like, oh, yeah, I got to go back to work on Monday because they hadn't announced yet that like the world was ending possibly. But like I was laying there in bed and it was like noon and I looked down at my phone and my Facebook Messenger is ringing and it was Levi Sanders, Bernie Sanders' oldest son. And I was just like, what? And then like answered the phone and we proceeded to have like a 3-hour conversation in which he was just kind of like, no, we see what you're doing. And they like just affirming and acknowledging me for what, I was doing for the campaign, which is then when I realized like, I was like, oh, like the tools that I was giving and cultivating as even a youth and then a young adult are actually all these things that are applicable now. So that really started my organizing or reignited my organizing capacities. And, so then coming to Galaei, again, it was like coming from the classroom. And then that's when I hit my stride when I realized like, oh, all this is actually organizing work, right? And then I was like, I know how to do this. I know how to create programming. I know how to coach people. I know how to lead, right? I know how to do those things because I've spent years in classrooms with children, with people it's not even insulting, but it's not that different. Really you're tasked with managing personalities, right? And Like I was like, I know how to do that. And I also know how to create cool, fun things to do. I know how to create innovative things to do. So that's how I like really kind of got started in Galaei. Already at Galaei, there was really robust programming. We started as an ASO back in 1989, grassroots organization, just really digging our heels in to serve, the Latinx community, especially with disparities in regards to AIDS during the height of the crisis. And then we've expanded the organization over the duration of that to now to include for trans by trans programming, which we call the TINGS program. It's trans, intersex, non-binary, and gender non-conforming services. I like it because it says ting, and it's like it reminds me of Shabba Ranks in like the '90s ting-a-ling-a-ling. So there's Tings programming, and that really focuses on linkages to care, resources. Like we lay it on the line really here. So that's everything we get. There's been times when we're like, we have to come out of our own pockets because we're not going to let a person in our community sleep outside or sleep in their car or go without food or whatever. So sometimes it does take risking your own personal funds and comfort to make sure that that happens. And so we've done that. And, our program manager, Hazel, here is really dynamic and really providing those services. And then we have our SWAC programming, which is our youth and young adult and family services. And that really centers around creating events, affinity groups, to really affirm and lift up queer and trans identities for young people. And then also support for parents who themselves are trans and may be dealing with children who they need support with around their transition. And also families that have youth who are queer and trans, and the parents are also dealing with, how to come to terms with that. So we really provide all of those things through one-to-one casework, and then also through mobilization and outreach efforts to make sure that people are affirmed. And then really, I think the cornerstone program of Galaei is our POP wellness program. And POP is an acronym too, stands for prioritizing our people. And that's just the prevention and education angle of all of this that sort of undergirds things. So, it's HIV prevention and education, but also with a layer that discusses all body wellness and approach to that. In that fashion. So not in a dogmatic or conservative way, but really looking at it through the lens of sex positivity and how we can address these emergent needs in our community. In the health disparities and socioeconomic disparities, especially for people living with HIV, which a lot of times, even right now, people don't treat it as if it's still the emergent crisis that it is, but it is, especially in Black and Brown communities. The numbers have been steady for the past decade plus. So we're not actually making the deep and profound impact that we need in the communities that are most vulnerable. So really the POP program is specialized to navigate that and navigate those conversations and develop the programs that are innovative, that bring to light, destigmatization and so many other layers that will help impact and end the epidemic by 2030. And then, of course, our fourth program, which is the newest program, which I started last year, is Philly Pride 365. It was not what I expected to be doing, to say the least. I kind of struggled with starting it up just because there's so many delicate conversations, which we're here to talk about, which how should Pride be facilitated and who should do it? And all those conversations that happen internal in community and then externally in community, people are asking, why do they even need it? Right. And originally it was kind of like, I wanted to put it down because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I don't think people on the outside, they see the glossiness, the fun, the experience of it all. But internally, like the administrative work, the challenging of the status quo happens like nano inch or nanometer by nanometer. It is like, every time I have a funding conversation with someone who wants to sponsor, what's put on the line is my value. and the value of my labor that I put in. And I was trying to not personalize that, but it's so true. Like, I'm like, I am asking for you to invest in our programming for our community. I don't take a salary from that particular effort. So this is literally operations cost for this event. Be that having adequate amounts of porta johns, or adequate amounts of like bike racking or whatever barriers that we need to make sure that people are protected, and security, all things internal security, so that way all things are buttoned up and taken care of by us. I mean, it's a lot of work. And then, when you have a conversation with someone and they're just like, well, you know, we think we're only going to give you $1,000. And I'm just like, but I can see your bulging pocket right there. Right. And what people don't realize is like that extra amount actually oftentimes is the difference between whether or not someone sees themselves and is engaged in the programming. So that way they walk away feeling like they were seen and lifted up and that their needs were met the day of Pride. So it really is that delicate. Often prides, we think about them as like these huge fun parties, but like some people, that is the only day that they will be in contact with a direct resource or service. It is the only day. And that's not just in Philadelphia, but that's speaking to the Tri-County and the Tri-State. When people are coming from places where they don't have the luxury of multiple orgs and nonprofits and grassroots initiatives to lift them up, they might be sitting there with a "Don't tread me" sign waving in their "Tread on me" sign waving in their front yard, or a I don't know, some other offensive sign waving in the front yard. So there's really one of those things where we have to be tasked with like building and bridging together those things. And, I'm happy now that we have these 4 programs. I'm looking to actually add more, believe it or not. Because, I think it's necessary, right? I think it's, you know, we can't be stagnant in this community. I think more than anything, I've recognized this recently, a lot of conversations in our community that are, like, oh, well, the next generation, Gen Z, they're going to be more progressive than the next and the next and the next and the next. And it's like, that might be in part true. That very much might be in part true. But also as implicitly as that is working in our favor, just know that those who don't believe in affirming us and who don't believe in seeing us, celebrating us, and making sure that we resource they're actually working hard to prevent us from having these things and from having equity. So, it's really a task for us to like make sure that those things and messages and activities are there at the forefront of not just Pride, but also all of our organizing efforts throughout the entire year.
Thank you for sharing that overview about Galaei and all the work you do. It's definitely critical and inclusive resources that so many in the LGBTQ plus community need. And I know you're talking about some of the Pride efforts going on. Before we talk a little bit more about some of the Pride divide, let's say, in terms of having an inclusive Pride, I did just want to talk a little bit about Pride, what it means to you personally, your own experiences with that. So what does Pride mean to you?
I mean, I get asked this question and it's like, the definition changes and what it means to me changes each and every time, just because I think it is like, it means so much to so many people. And I have to hold all of those themes while I'm really generating the ideas and things around what I think Pride, our event, should include. And I think there's an important distinction there, right? Like, I don't own Pride in Philadelphia. That's not the thing. I am not the pinnacle of Pride stuff in Philadelphia. The Pride Festival is an event. It is but one event. It is by no means the only event or the best event, right? That's up for individuals to determine for themselves. Really, like, what Pride means to me is an opportunity for people to be liberated that day, every single day of the year, right? So it's something we carry. It's a theme that we carry within ourselves. But most importantly is not to focus during Pride Month. We have to be very careful with the messages we tell ourselves, right? People are like, oh, this is Pride Month. Well, what does that mean? Who told us that it was Pride Month? Why isn't it Pride Month every month, right? Just the same way that I think about Black History Month, just the way think about Latinx Heritage Month, or, LGBTQ Heritage Month, or Women's History Month, you name it. you know, we have to be very careful with how we ingest those messages and how we, really perpetuate sort of that idea that things are owned and that someone can take them away or that someone can take them away from you. That's not what liberation is about. So, the event of Pride to me, right, that I am producing, that particular event, I mean, it means a ton to me. Like the event itself means a ton to me. And I think most importantly, it's because of what I've witnessed while not just while organizing the event and all the administrative work that starts well in advance, right? We're talking November, December last year. I'm already peppering our way up these ideas. But it's not just that process. It's also the day of, and it's seeing like people like just enjoying themselves. Like, I mean, I like a lot of people wax poetic about how our community doesn't have spaces and da 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 da. Like, and that's all true, right? But like at these events, it's like, you know, we're able, we have license. I'm happy that I am a shield that like creates a platform that gives license to individuals that day to do as they feel, to dance as loud as they want to sing as loud as they want to sing, to dance as hard as they want to dance, to be the beautiful, individual and unique individual that they want to be in the world, or that they are in the world. Like I think that's why it's so important to me, is because for many years, like that was like not something that I even afforded to myself, was that like I could do and access power that way by actually knowing who I am and doing the work to dig deep into myself to figure out who I am. So that way I could operate in a powerful and influential way in community. Um, and not just in the LGBT community. I'm talking about in community at large, right? I said this actually recently. I was talking with I was doing an interview on the news, and it just occurred to me because it was Mother's Day coming up, and I was like, oh my God, I think I got it. Like, why? And me and my mother have in the past, like, have like everybody's parents, like we've had our hurdles. I grew up poor, grew up, in unsafe environments from time to time. And, one of the things that it keyed into me the other day, I was just like, oh my God, it was like some of the issues when I was a teenager, when I was rebelling, if you will, I really thought to myself, it was like, oh my God, I think I got it. My mom actually just wanted me to find myself and be authentically me. Right. And to whatever end, right? At some point, your parents give up the ghost. They're just like either I'm going to accept you and affirm you as you are, or you give up the ghost too. It's like accept me as I am, or you're just not going to be part of my life. My mother chose to be part of my life, and I'm lucky in that sense. And when she did, like now I look back and I'm just like, oh, it's because she wanted me to be authentically who I am. And I think any good parent knows that if their children are authentically who they are, and operating in that capacity in the world, then they are absolutely unstoppable, right? I can absolutely say that right now, I feel like anything I put my mind to, I can achieve. And that kind of really speaks to the foregoing process before the event of all that administrative work. You know, it's a lot. Like it's a lot. But I think, it's a constant challenge of recentering myself and humbling myself, but also at the same time, like, trusting myself, trusting my vision, trusting the community, trusting community partners, trusting what they want to see and believing what they want to see, and believing that to some degree I can assist with helping them make it come to fruition. Um, so it's really like pride means pride means a lot to me right now. And I think it's this year it's going to mean a lot to so many other people too, even those that may have taken it for granted, because we are challenged with so many things politically, and we just can't afford to take these kind of moments for granted. We can't, in my estimation, afford to take moments of togetherness, of connectedness with community. And, I recognize that coming out of the pandemic, I was like, we can't not do this because, like, we just came out of a global pandemic where people were kept away from each other for it wasn't months or years. I don't know. Like, I think everyone lost their bearings in regards to time around that. But, you know, you know, now I think even still now more than we still, in some degree, we're starting to take it for granted a little bit more, and really not going and saying like, this could all be like taken away again, and everybody would be siloed into their apartments and, um, really, not able to engage in community, to even complain about the things that are not working in our favor or that aren't, the most supportive, and I think really it's recognizing that with humility, but also calling upon our institutions, that the challenge is not to go like, yeah, you should be good with what you got. The challenge is like, they also need to juice these opportunities well, use these times where we are free and we are together for transformation, for restoration, for forgiveness, for all of the things that, we don't have the opportunity to express to each other when we're no longer here or we're no longer to engage together in public.
And as we're talking about, pride, there has been some conversation in recent years and even discourse within the community about how pride should be celebrated. I'm specifically thinking of one example a few years back where there was some controversy or debate over whether pride events should be kink friendly or family friendly. And I think that's just kind of one aspect of that conversation of how pride should be celebrated. So I was wondering what your own personal opinion is on that.
Yeah, like, interesting, like, interesting conversation. But I think we also too often get caught in an either or conversation. What's right or what's wrong? It's just like, to me, I'm just like, those like antiquated ideas about who and how we should celebrate, not just pride, but anything. I've seen people do it about birthday parties. Like, I'm like, don't go. Like, I don't know what to tell folks. And I hate to be that abrupt, but it's just like, don't go. I've seen even after Pride, I get caught on social media too, like scrolling through TikTok, and I see some like influencer going like, at Pride, it's all about people dancing with their shirts off and sex. And I'm just like, well, that's part of life. It is pride is just a microcosm of what we experience and enjoy in our lives, both privately and in public throughout the rest of the year. And, I defy anyone, like, this is a festival and we're out in the street dancing, but like, I've been in many nightclubs where the same activity is happening with cis folks as well, straight cis folks as well, on a random Saturday night. Right. So, I think those ideas of what should and shouldn't happen need to be dispelled in general. And, as someone who I actually was in the classroom every single day, cultivating programming that was appropriate for young people as young as 3 years old, to affirm them as children, not, as in any way possible trying to indoctrinate them or anything, but you are a beautiful being on this earth, and you have the universe in front of you. You can be and whatever you want to be, and really affirming that wish to young people kind of informs how I think about how pride works. I had students who had come out as trans at the age of 5, not saying those words, I'm trans, but if after a while, if you keep repeating to your parents and your physicians and doctors and teachers that you do not want to be referred to as as he or boy, or to stand in line with the boys or whatever, or stand in line with the girls, those like really archaic binary things, you know, after a while you have to develop your programming around what the reality of this is. And the reality of pride is this. Number one, I don't make the rules here, right? I don't get to say keep your shirt on over there. Like, it'd be ridiculous anyway. It's like 90 degrees, it's summertime. But I don't get to say that. What I do get to say, though, and lend to this conversation around what should and shouldn't happen at Pride, is that what we've done at Pride is we've developed specific affinity spaces, right? So we have a youth and family zone that's expansive. In the youth and family zone, there's bounce houses, there's food, there's, crafts, art, there's, its own little performance stage. We had a youth drag show last year. It's really its own programming right there. And we use our partners in queer serving organizations to facilitate that, right? We also have a sober zone, right? So people that don't want to drink, or that are living sober lives. And, I was just talking with an activity group called the Phoenix, and they're amazing. And one of the things that they do for their sober programming is like, you only have to be sober or not to have had a drink or a substance. I can't remember the exact law, but it's a specific hour period of time before there are events to be considered sober for the event, right? And it's really a way of like them using these activities to really teach people into sobriety in ways that are more innovative than only going through abstinence, right? Like, how do you live up into the kind of life that you want to live, and do that with in a symbiotic nature without having alcohol or having, any other substances involved. And I really think it's a very progressive way of looking at it. But yeah, that's like another affinity space. There's also our decompression zone. Like, that's a separate zone for people with seen and unseen disabilities. This year, I think we're going to have like a sensory dance party, which is really exciting. You get the headphones and everyone gets to turn to a channel and jam out. We have a sporting zone. There's activities for grown-ups to like have fun. We have a sapphic space. It's the first time we're having a sapphic space at Pride, which, I think is really revolutionary in the sense that, like, how many times do you see like that prides are centered and only lift up, or, basically cis gender white men, and particularly those with like pretty privilege, right? So you have, this person who's 6'2", the quintessential Ken doll, and that's the person that's on the flyer, right? And that person is saying, you need to come here to see me. And then everyone else is cut out of the conversation. Well, we kind of flip that on its head because we know, like, you're going to come. We want you to come, but also we want to prioritize the voices and the art that actually informs our culture. Like, we cast aside, Black trans women in so many areas of our lives, especially when it comes to resources. And it's like, they create the art, the terms, the language that we often use in regular conversation, and they create the art, the drag, the performances, like all of the things that we love and enjoy. And it's like, we're celebrating that day, and we're compensating them, equitably for it. And I think that's another aspect to this, is like, instead of people, if I was to lend advice to people, instead of focusing on what pride is or isn't or should or shouldn't be, let's talk about what it can be. right? And what it can be is a space that holds family, youth, and young adult services that's more family centered, and also our, kink spaces that are fun and engaging, that are consent driven for grown-ups. We also have Legacy Lane, which is an ode to our elders and also leaders that are presently still with us. And we have Vice. So Vice Alley is actually, and I defy anyone to tell me that it shouldn't be at Pride, because my dear friend, Masso, and was my child. They were my child in community, and the first year that I was sort of the wizard behind, sort of turning the wheels on Pride, they were one of my touchstones in like getting things rolling. And they're no longer with us. And one of the programs that they cultivated at one of our local bars here in Philadelphia, the Bike Stop, Vice, um, it's still going. And like they were a keystone in making that happen and doing it in a way that I think really brought in every letter of the alphabet soup that is our community, right? And did it in such a really immersive way that it still exists even when they're not there, and even when Vice isn't happening. There's people that are, that are engaged with that community space at the Bike Stop that maybe 10 years ago, I would have never guessed or imagined. But now this is a home to so many people who enjoy, queerness and alternative lifestyle inside of the queer community, nightlife performers, everyone from, the people that you would see on a drag stage to people that you would see, being flogged, right? So there's like, it's, and it's a place for everyone to come together and enjoy community. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you walk in and it's like the red light special. Sometimes it is just us hanging out and having a beer, right? And, even on Pride itself, the day itself, it's like, sometimes it's just being in front of each other in community with people that have shared interest, right? And, so saying like, oh, well, it needs to be more family centered. Well, I taught children for many years and I love children, but I also love going home from them. I don't really want children for myself right now. I think my partner would say otherwise. They fawn over babies every time we're like walking in public somewhere. But for me, I'm like, not right now anyway. I don't really see myself having a child. And like I like to go to spaces where, I'm able to be a grown up with other grown ups in whatever capacity that is necessary. So that is like, if I'm going to the sober space, that's not a youth and family space. That's a space for grown ups who are living sober lives. We're not just casting people who are living sober lives and saying like, well, go with the family and the youth programming. It's like, no, you're a grown up and you deserve to hang around grown ups. And, this conversation, I think, like I said, on what pride should or shouldn't be, it's such a false floor way of looking at pride, because pride should be ultimately every queer or trans person's dream, right? And that means that we have to share the stage with everyone. And it means you might have to just stand on your square alone, or you might have to share your square because you have likenesses of other people. But as long as you're there to love, lift up, support, and affirm other people, you should be able to have a voice in making pride what you want it, even if it's not at the festival. Because when I say like it don't don't come, it's not to say, you know, just sit at home and like watch Netflix. But I guess if that's pride to you, you should do that, right? Um, but I know many people that want a green space for pride. They want pride in a space that, is restorative in that fashion. And if you want it during Pride Month, there's literally 30 other days to create that on. If you want it any other time throughout the summer of the year, there, we are one of the most creative demographics in the world. In world history, we are. There is no reason why we should be looking at other people's events and and saying that it should fit within my rubric or belief of what is necessary. As long as people are walking away with joy, resource, and being restored in some way, form, or fashion, like I think we should be applauding each other for those efforts.
The work you're doing is great to create an inclusive pride experience for everyone. You talked about, having a space for our LGBTQ plus elders, those who are sober, those who, want to have a youth center. And so I'm wondering, with all those initiatives in place, do you remember the first pride you attended, not with the organization, but, yourself individually, and what you saw there and how it impacted your drive for wanting to create an inclusive place for future prides?
Yeah, I mean, the first pride that I went to, it was like, I mean, maybe like 99, maybe, I don't know, but it wasn't a huge deal in to me in that sense, just because like I was like overwhelmed. I was like, where do I go, where do I turn? And was really a child overwhelmed by what was going on. I remember it was really hot and we were in this random parking lot down by like Delaware Avenue. It was like hot that day. I remember like wanting to like charge out there because I was with some friends. And I was going to take my shirt off, and I remember being like, "It is so hot. Like I'm putting it's too hot to have my shirt off, right? I need like some shade on my actual skin and body." And so it was like it wasn't like so fun as much as it was like I was overwhelmed. So I don't even really remember, how. I just remember it was hot, right? And then I think the first meaningful pride that I went to, in which I was like, wow, this is really great, was actually not here in Philadelphia. It was in Montreal. And I went there, I think it was like 2011 for World Pride. And it was the most phenomenal like experience I have ever had. Like, I mean, and this isn't just like, oh, because all them boys up there from Canada, like from, like with their I don't know, what is it, the Canadian suit or whatever, where it's like, denim on the top, denim on the bottom. No, it's the Canadian tuxedo. That's what it is. But no, it was actually, I think more than anything, it's like, it was such an immersive pride. Like everyone could walk together in the parade. That year, they didn't have like these like barriers up that are like, this is the parade and you can't be part of it. You have to be a spectator on the day of Pride, right? That to me it really kind of transformed the way I thought about Pride. Was like, no, people shouldn't be spectating on Pride. It's yours. Enjoy it. Right. And that means not just at our event, but like, if you're like on Pride Day, I'm going to the zoo, or I'm just having a cookout in my backyard with some friends over, like I celebrate you celebrating that, because truth be told, if like I wasn't in this seat of called into action to do this, I might spin by your house and grab a plate. Like I might spin your block and grab a plate at your little block party or your picnic somewhere. Like, who made the potato salad, right? But I think that's really what informed it, is like watching that in Montreal and really seeing the way that their city is even set up, like the way their neighborhood is set up on St. Catherine. Like every front of each bar has a porch to it. And it's like, I mean, you gotta go. I'm just going to say this, you gotta go. Right. And I remember, ironically, I was sitting at this bar up there called the Black Eagle. And I was sitting there having a beer, and I look up, and randomly, like the owners actually of the bike stop at the time were like, they come like walking in and be like, look at each other like, what are you doing here? Like on a random Thursday night before Pride. So it was like, that was really what, I think inspired, my ideas of like what Pride should look like and how it should operate. I think the other layers to it of like different affinity spaces and things like that. Um, I think like really it was kind of like, it was when I sat down with the original plans that I had put together in 2022, and it was really kind of in an emergency situation. Like we said to the city, we're going to do this and we don't have plans. So I kind of drafted a bunch of different ways that it could, skeletons of how it could go. And then me and my dearly departed friend Masso kind of sat down, and I was like, we should have this space, and we could have a space that says this and says that. What do we call it? What do we call this one? What do we call that? And we really kind of peppered through those ideas together, and came up with like titles for things. But we still, at that point, it was the first time I ever did anything that big, so I didn't know how it was going to pan out or facilitate. And I think the first year was like, it was like getting on the bike the first year. It wasn't even riding it, which is like, just try to stand up, right, on your bicycle, or stand up on skates, right? And we stood up on skates, and it was phenomenal. I think they said that we had doubled the typical attendance at Pride in Philadelphia from what was an average of like 20,000, 22,000 to an upwards of almost 50,000 people. And that was that first year. And then last year, though it was also sort of unexpected and not anticipated. I didn't really anticipate that I was going to be doing Pride again. I think, were it not for um, me having conversations with a couple of elders in our community that I went to and consulted, I was just like, frankly, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of doing this. It's a big deal. It's a lot of responsibility. And one elder in particular, and if they listen to this, they'll be like, yep, I remember I said that, is they were like, stop. They just flatly told me, stop being afraid. You just got to stop being afraid. If I was afraid of what people thought or how people were going to receive me with everything that I did, then I probably wouldn't have done anything in my life. But I've created things out of nothing because I believed in myself, and I just wasn't afraid. If you have good intentions and your heart is in the right place, people are going to be resource serviced, and people are going to walk away better having been at your event or engaged with you than if they had not been. And then another elder basically was was just like, if you want to do it, then do it. Does it call to you? Does it seem like you're in the right space and in the right place when you're doing that? If that's the case, then you should do it. And, you know, so like a lot of the stuff, it's like through experiences, but also, through past experiences, but more and more, it's like learning day by day what pride like feels like in new ways. It's like, and kind of trying to integrate that like young queer person into these things, because I'm a little bit older now. I'm 42 years old. So, I mean, my younger brother's 25 and he thinks I'm corny, and I would tend to agree with him. So, um, so, but, like now really thinking through and kind of trying to bring to life some of the things that I missed out on, but also I just realized this the other day. I was like, I grew up you know, in the going out with friends and things like that, partying, bar hopping, all those fun things that you do when you're 20, or maybe they're not fun to you, right? Um, and I was like, but they were formative for me, and I, I hope that young people have the opportunity to do that too. I want that for young people, especially in Philadelphia and the Tri-County. I want people to look at, the spaces that I inhabited, and not just in the neighborhood, but all over Philadelphia, and really see opportunities for themselves to, use them as apparatuses to bounce themselves off of and grow bigger and better and stronger and bigger institutions and bigger prides and things like that in the future once I'm long gone. Um, so they're very formative things. And I think, that's really kind of, like what I'm ultimately hoping that Pride does coming out of this.
Can you tell us why a truly inclusive pride is so important, especially as it relates to the intersectionality of identities within the LGBTQ plus community?
When people see themselves in something, they don't just like engage with it, but they see themselves in it, and they're more apt to actually, like for me, just because we do direct services every day in care center, I tend to look at it through that lens, right? You know, if I'm looking, like traditionally in Philadelphia, when I would look at Pride, I didn't see myself in Pride. And it wasn't that I didn't go, I just didn't see myself in it. Right. And, you know, I don't think that's a disparaging comment. I think that's just an honest assessment of the terrain of the times, right? You know, what we did in community typically, not just with in our community here in Philadelphia, but in advertising on TV, we tend to tell stories of, homonormativity, right? Of like what it's like, queer as folk was like focused around that. What does gay life look like for these two, you know, well resourced, talented, attractive on someone's scale? What do these four cis white men with privilege do with their lives as gay people? Right. And it's like, not that we didn't watch it, like I watched it. It was the first time that I actually saw two men on TV kiss, right? But like, it was looking at that, and like I still didn't see myself in it, right? And we need events that tell our whole stories and that create platforms for people to tell their story through art. And I think, having a truly inclusive pride loses that. If you, or we lose having a truly inclusive pride, and one that's all encompassing, that provides that implicit resource of people feeling affirmed, um, and people getting resourced, because that person is not coming to pride if you don't speak to them, and if you don't tell them and invite people to come. We say pride, right? This, and we can add as many letters to the acronym as we want to. The problem is that if you do not invite people into the fold, then they won't come, or they're less likely to come. And I think it's important to front face that, even if the engagement isn't at the height level. Too many times, I think, not just in our own community, but in the world, we're looking for, to justify investing in something when it's already there, rather than front loading that and doing the if you build it, it will come kind of scenario. And I think that's what we're tasked with, like, is really, you know, in my own intersectionality and in my own intersectional identities, is really kind of making sure that those themes are centered in there, because otherwise, what the hell am I doing producing it if it's not for people like me, or that share my experiences? Like, and that's also not just talking about, our identities as queer people, but also, socioeconomic factors too. Like, if pride isn't free and it doesn't include spaces for people that don't have money and resources, then what are we doing? Especially as one of the poorest demographics globally, but especially in our country. Like, what are we saying to people if we're saying you have to pay $20 to get in just to be around other queer people? Like, just to be in community with other people, like to some degree, things have to cost money. Like, I can't front load the cost for everything. I'm one individual and I grew up poor too. Like, it's hard. Like, it's hard. But like, I'll be damned if someone on the festival ground that day doesn't come up to me and go like, hey, like, my friend doesn't have money, right? Can you get them a burger? I mean, we do things like we have free snacks throughout the day, but for more substantial things, I've done it before, like where I've walked people up the street to Walgreens and been like, here, like, grab what you need, or someone, it's like my friend needs an Uber home randomly on the festival ground of thousands and thousands of people. And I'm just like, okay, very quickly here, I'm going to Venmo you, go home, or I call them an Uber from my phone. Like, I live out on Pride Day what I believe in. And I think more people in our community need to do that, rather than focusing on whether or not it aligns or fits within their vision. It's show up that day in the way that you believe should be shown up that day. If you want family that day and you believe it should be youth and family centered, then, I suggest you grab yourself and your beliefs and go and stand at a table and volunteer time with one of the youth serving organizations that does that hard work 365 days a year, the kind of work that you won't do, but you'll lend your opinion about, right? If you say to yourself, like, pride should include more, community engagement. Then there are apparatuses to do that. You can reach out to me, but you can also reach out to any number of the grassroots organizations that are tabling at Pride. And really, you can also start to think about ways that you can create and bring into the world and into the universe your idea of what Pride is, because people need to hear from you. People need to hear that.
Definitely. And can you tell us some special experiences that you hold near and dear to your heart through working at Pride and attending Pride?
Yeah, I mean, through the production of Pride, like since I've been, the program director for Pride, um, there's like many ways that I look at that. Like there's, the internal way where I've seen like our staff at Galaei really step into itself and step into power around what pride means to them, right? Um, Previously, they may, in some ways, were not engaged with pride, right? Lived in neighborhoods from around the city and were like, I'm not going downtown for pride. And it was an optional thing. And now it's something that they want to be part of. And whether or not that's actually, working the day up or even having the option to just enjoy it for themselves, which I offer for them as well now. Seeing why pride is important to them is like inspiring. Um, and seeing like the joy that they take out of like being part of something that's bigger than themselves, right? And I think that's one of the things internally that I've witnessed and I'm really proud of. I think the other, just, there's I shared the thing about, you know, one of my mentors and shared also about, a stranger. But wow, like the first year I'll never forget, there was two young people and someone had a seizure and the gurney was coming through, there was a nurse giving CPR, and I look over and I see these two young people like sobbing, like clearly afraid of what they were witnessing. And I was like, can I like I was like, can you come with me? And they're like, do you feel safe coming with me? I kind of use my training as like a teacher to do this, right? So it's like, do you feel safe coming with me? I'm one of the organizers here. I showed my badge. I want you to like, how old are you? I asked them a few questions. And I was like, I'm just going to take you over to this resource tent over here. And I was like, where are your grown-ups at? Are they here? And they're like, no, they left us here and they went home early. And I was like, and they're like, and we're lost. And I was like, well, are you from Philadelphia? And they're like, yeah, but they were from Germantown, and which is like not geographically close to Center City. And I was like, do you know how to get home, like on the train? And they're like, from here, no. So I was like, okay. So I took them, and what we have is in the pop wellness section, we have, activations there with on-site therapy, and caseworkers and so on. So I was like, do you feel comfortable, talking to this person? And they're like, can you just sit with us? And I was like, yeah. So I sat there and held their hands and they cried. I got them water. And then I was like, have you all eaten? And which is like the key to so many people's hearts. It's the key to mine, right? It's like, if, get me a bag of Doritos, and I'm putty in your hands. But, I was like, have you eaten? And they were like, no. I was like, okay, well, come with me. And so I like turned my walkie off, let everyone always know I was leaving the festival ground, and took them into Walgreens. And I was just like, here, I want you to grab, what you need. And they were like, really? And I was just like, yeah, just grab what you need and pay for it. And their phones had died. So I was like, you know, I asked the guy behind the counter to charge one of their phones. We're calling one of their parents, but they weren't answering. So I was like, I need you to give me your address. So that way I can send you home, both home and an Uber. And so they, got their stuff. I paid for it. And then we sat in the park, just right there off of where Jefferson's campus is, sat right there. I called them an Uber and got them into the car. And I was like, this is my number. I need you to call me when you get home. And, you know, they got home, and I was worried actually, but it was so busy for the rest of the day that I didn't have a chance. But the next day I got a call, and it was one of their parents, and they were like, "Oh my god, like thank you so much for taking care of my babies." And we and they were explaining like, no, we didn't abandon them or leave them. We actually, they said that they would be okay there, but it was just one of those things where the 16 and 17-year-old were overwhelmed with the size of the crowd, all of these busy things going on. And suddenly now you're disoriented and you don't know how to get out nor get home, and your phone dies. It's like getting lost in a mall prior to when we had cell phones, right? When it's like you're looking at the star and it's just you're here and you're like, where is here? um, but it was one of those moments that I was just like, this is why it's like important, because those two young queer people, um, literally that day for the first time got what it felt like to be part of a community that creates a safety net and closes the loop on safety for them, right? They may not have ever felt that before. I don't know if they have or haven't. Um, but I do know like that day, that's the feeling that I got, was that might have been one of the first opportunities right there. And it was like such a tender moment that first year. I mean, I cried after Pride so hard, because it was a lot of work, and it's like throwing a birthday party, and then everyone leaves with you with the dishes, right? And it was like one of those feelings, but also the beauty of it. I mean, it was so humbling, like the entire immersive experience, that year, last year, during National Coming Out Day, and this coming year, I can feel it building it here. um is that like right afterwards, it's so immense and so humbling, the power of so many people being together in one space, even without intention. It's very humbling. And to be, one of the cornerstones in making sure that that happens, annually, um, is like, it's such a delicate thing and at the same time powerful. So yeah, those are some of the small, but there's so many too. I mean, I could go forever telling these intricate stories of like, I saw this person get sneakers at the Prevention Meets Fashion who had a tent there. And when they found out that they were free, they like burst this grown, person, like broke into tears. They were like 6'4", like big old person. And they were like, like they didn't believe that these brand new, kicks were free. So, and, those things, I'm naming the ones that I see, but like they happened all over the festival, and they happen. The kindness that's shown, oh my God, like people are just smiling. I'm like, everybody put their cattiness card aside. Like the shade and the read was like left the day before, and everyone enjoys themselves. And then by the evening hour, it's kind of like back. But but at least for the day in the middle of the sun, we get to enjoy that. So yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, we definitely need more kindness in the world. So it's great to hear those stories and knowing that there's countless more that occur at Pride.
Yeah.
More recently, as we talk about Pride, we see corporations displaying their rainbows, changing their social icons to rainbow and love is love throughout the month of June. Maybe they'll even put a sign up or sponsor something at a parade. But July 1st comes and usually they're gone. So there's been a lot of conversation around, corporate greed, rainbow capitalism, rainbow washing, pink washing. So I was wondering, what role, if any, do you believe corporations and businesses should play in supporting Pride celebrations, and how can they do so authentically?
It's a difficult question because, we live in a world of institutionalized capitalism. And I think people need to understand that, right? We're not all agreeing tomorrow to not pay our taxes. We're also not agreeing tomorrow to not go shop at Target, right? I think we all understand the necessity of what institutionalized, the scarcity, I should say, of what institutionalized capitalism forces you to do. And in our own small way, the only thing that I can do in this moment, at least, others might have more revolutionary ideas of what can be done. But for me, is like, how do we build in the equity factor here? Because we have people, queer and trans people working at these institutions too, that are toiling away and oftentimes being erased by their employers or not being affirmed by their employers. And it's like, well, I also don't want to participate in that either by saying that you can't lift up yourself and what you do every single day at, on Pride Day, right? In some way, shape, or form. So, I think really what they can do is invest more money into their employee resource groups that are LGBTQ centered. And really through that, those resource groups are able to determine equitably how they should be delineating those funds and giving them out to community, not just for Pride, because I think, you know, we want to make sure also that like, people aren't focusing all their dollars and throwing them into one bucket when throughout the rest of the year, people need resources and services as well. And, I think a better way and what we've tried to do is really make sure that there's an understanding that like we're not selling and front facing what your corporation is doing, right? But what we are doing is we're accepting your dollars to ensure that there are resources given to the most marginalized in our community. So using Pride again as a valve to make sure that the funding is there to support the people on the festival ground that day, but also thereafter if there's money left over, because we know there's always going to be a need, right? Um, I also like, there's the conversation about elite capture, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's like how imperialism and capitalism takes art, takes your gifts and really immediately funnels them into institutions and mechanisms that in some cases can be harmful and archaic, but ultimately that sort of perpetuate a system that is unsustainable, right? And it's very difficult, I think, to straddle that line of like, how do we take down these systems while also making sure that people are resourced at the same time? If someone comes to me tomorrow and they need housing, by hook or crook, I'm going to make sure that that person has a roof over their head as a Black trans woman. Like I'm going by hook or crook, I'm going to make it happen. If that means coming out of my personal funds, which, come from, the government or come from all these other institutions, like that could be deemed problematic as well. I'm going to make sure that you don't rest your head on a cinder block tonight, but that you actually have a nice soft bed that's safe, in a place that's affirming for yourself. Like I'm going to do that to the best of my ability every single day. And especially on Pride Day, That's how I look at it when it comes to corporations. But like, you know, I name myself as like being anti-capitalist, but knowing that like, when I was younger, I was like, burn it down, right? I was all about it. And not even that that's not still there, but I think I approach things with the whole tool belt now and just only with the sledgehammer. I think there's a time for the sledgehammer. And if everybody's willing to pick theirs up right now, then let's go, right? But if, you know, you're not going to use me as the shield for that, right? I don't want to be a martyr for the cause. I also want to be here, when we're able to resource people in an equitable way. I want to be here to witness how things are transforming. I want to be here for those things. And I want to be here to reap the benefits of it too. Because, I am surviving this, capitalist hellscape just like everybody else is. I've dealt with predatory employers, you name it. And I think it's important really also in those conversations that we make sure to like humanize the people that are actually producing these things, because I have to pay taxes too. I have to go home. I have a partner who I have to take care of. I have, a family and an entire network that extends outside of just the Pride event, but people that are, you know, not even necessarily personal friends, but some of them are just community members, clients of the organization that are like, hey, I need $20 to pay for my cell phone, like, or to whatever it is, because things cost money. And I think that's also an undergirding factor is like things cost money, and it's unfortunate. We don't, I wish that we could barter and trade our way through an equitable pride where everyone was able to lift things up. But unfortunately, I'm tasked with raising thousands and thousands of dollars just to make sure that there's adequate enough bathrooms on the festival ground, right? Or just to make sure, like I said, like, do we want stages? Do I want to lift up a Black trans performer and make sure that they're adequately paid and compensated? Absolutely. And I can't do that personally by just begging small institutions, or and I've offered this too. It's like, hey, if people want a phone bank, I used to do that for Sanders campaign. I've done it for many other political campaigns. Like, yeah, let's get to going. But I also don't want us to pay for Pride on the front end or at the gate. Like, and it doesn't seem realistic for me to go like, okay, well, Pride is free to get in the gate, but I'm also going to call you, Rob, and say, hi, Rob, would you like to donate $20 a day to Pride? And you're just like, oh, I should have just paid $20 at the gate to get in, right? So yeah, I think there's it's a robust conversation that I think needs to keep happening. And I also think, in the undoing of all things, right? I understand that to some degree in this universe, some things are temporary, right? And as we are, evolving or refining ways to communicate with each other more directly, you know, some things are going to ultimately become useless, right? You know, that's just what's going to happen as things transform and move in different directions. And I don't have control over that. But with the time that I have now, I humbly am just accepting what I've been called in to do. And I think, you know, grace given, latitude given, I try to do it in the most equitable way as possible. And I think any other pride organizer around the country, I can't speak for them, but if they're not doing it that way, I think they probably need to think about it, right? Especially some of the bigger prides. The smaller prides, smaller municipalities, it's a lot easier to kind of, get around the sponsorship costs because, the city or the whatever municipality isn't charging as much. But, things are expensive even just for the permits. And oftentimes I've gone like I I I've paid out of pocket, for many of the other tangential things that people don't see. Like even just making sure my staff, who are all queer and trans, who are all Black and brown, like making sure that they have like, Ubers to get to and from, this meeting or that meeting, or excuse me, making sure that they have like a meal, because they don't have food for the evening during the Pride weekend, right? So and also making sure that they have a good time too, because when you don't have money in your pocket, it sucks to be at Pride. So, and I want to make sure that also throughout that weekend, even if they're working the day of, that they have those things. And sometimes it's not set up that way when, payday is on the first and so is rent day, right? So it's like also sometimes I come out of pocket and go in the red for those things too. Like I said, you risk what you can, and I think that's part of, I mean, I guess what I was called in to do here for this. So I just try to do my best.
And what would you like to see in future Pride celebrations?
Really, in a dream world, um, geographically speaking, in Philadelphia, in a dream world, I would like for Pride to continue to expand and for to take Broad Street. Like I think that would be like just absolutely epic, epic. And I would like to see more institutions that aren't corporations get involved. You know, like some of our houses of art and influence, the Symphony House, you name it, right? All of these big odes to, you know, art and culture in Philadelphia. I would like to see them more involved in a substantial way, lifting up not just their ERGs, but really like engaging in the performance value and adding art and beauty to the event. I would like to see, I would like to see more stages for more people to perform. I would like to have more money into it so that I could really compensate, you know, the people that are helping to develop this, including myself. Um, like, I would like to see that, you know, in a way, you know, that actually like validates the kind of labor we put in the state that we're in this world, right? Um, you know, like for the 3 years that I've never taken a salary from this. Like I said, I've gone in the red many times, and you know why it's a labor of love. I'm like, I'm tapping my pocket right now. Like, geez, like, and I really want there to be not just for me, but for future generations, for there to be something that's in place there so that these events exist sustainably. And also so that we're not tasked with like running around with our heads cut off seeking, donations and finances in order to make them go, but really so that they can exist sustainably and untethered from like a corporate heartbeat, right? They need to be sustainably resourced, even if that's part of the mechanism, but that the stake in that is not that you get to claim it as your own, right? Not pink washing corporations or rainbow washing corporations, but instead them actually investing in us on the front end because we are their staff. We are the people that make their systems go. And ultimately, instead of the pizza party, the payback is this, right? The payback is when you actually give to foundations and give to into nonprofits, you give to charity, you give to directly to people in a restorative manner in order to be able to like do what they will and liberate themselves, rather than kind of going through all these metrics to kind of skirt around there and then take credit for what's being done. I remember the first, like the Target Pride t-shirts, and don't even get me started on that Juneteenth ice cream a couple years ago. That was like, what? Excuse my language. What the fuck? Like, it was crazy. I was like, what is that? Right. But, I think we've come to a time where like those conversations, people are tired of having those conversations. Y'all already know better. We know you know better, and you know better too. Like, so it really now it's just like, well, what's the restorative measure here? What does that look like? And, I think that might look different to everyone, and it's up to each individual to determine. And then collectively as a community, we can have that conversation and lift up those demands to other folks. But, right now with one event, and, just, I guess, a few thousand voices that are saying that they enjoy it. Um, to say the least, not a few thousand. Is last year it was like 60,000. I was like, pat myself on the back, right? But with that many people that are saying they enjoy it, and some people saying, "Geez, like this was the best Pride ever." I remember forget like there was like a 70-year-old dude walking down Locust Street, and like he was like, "Did you all create this?" I still have my T-shirt on my walkie. Did you all create this? And a couple of the staff, former staff here, will remember this. And we were like, "Yeah." He was like, and his eyes welled with tears, and he was like, "It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And I was like, "Oh my God, that was like amazing!" Like this queer elder and community. And I heard that also from the mentor that said to me, um, he would probably be annoyed if I mentioned his name, but I'm going to. Uh, Jose DeMarco, who said to me, you know, if it's calling from you, do it, right? Um, but one of the things he told me afterwards was like, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. And that to me is what counts. It's what counts is not just the people that are close to you that say that, but also people that inspire you, and also strangers that walk away going like, wow, that was a pinnacle moment in my life. So yeah, I hope that more things, more resources are pulled in with last asked being pulled out. And that way we're able to create a wider valve for more resources to reach, the hands of people that are more marginalized than ourselves.
And I think there are a lot of people who, hear these conversations and agree that, yeah, we need to make sure Pride is more accessible, more inclusive, but just them agreeing isn't enough. There needs to be an action taken there. So, what are some steps we can all collectively as a community take to make sure we're building an inclusive Pride for all?
Um, you know, community, community is a funny word, right? Um, but I think meaningfully, and sincerely engaging in conversations with people and not just those that agree with you, right? Um, in that first year that I was, engaged in, co-producing this event, there was a lot of different ideas of what pride should be, shouldn't be. There's a lot of tension in that space. And, I think that also in part informed how I think about pride now too, because I'm trying my best. I don't know if I'm succeeding or not. I think that's up for other people to determine, but trying my best to like include and meet up to the factors that we all, really kind of believe that new prides should be centered around. And, but I think a meaningful way to engage that going forward is probably like with some sort of like, first of all, at the event is having people to be able to celebrate their beliefs or put them into a formulaic form to get information back to you, right? So that's not just some random person complaining on a TikTok or a reel, but also them being able to reach out directly to the organization to share their experiences, and have a conversation about it. But on the front end, I think like, sort of like a community engagement, um, you know, idea around how, community action committees and things like that, um, to make sure that we're on stack with what's emerging in our community, right? Um, One of the benefits of producing Pride is that in part we are the community that we serve, right? I can't speak for every metric of diversity, but like, and each individual has their own spirit experience and inlet to what pride means to them or doesn't mean anything to them, right? Um, but I think what we do here is we engage as many partners as possible and as many organizations as possible. We engage as many community opinions as possible, at least, as like I said, as much as possible, because it's a lot of heavy work, capturing those ideas and opinions and putting them to something that people believe that they see themselves in is very difficult, especially when people's ideas might exist outside of the realm of what's even, institutionally possible. Um, at least in this event, which is why I kind of lean on say like having people, if you don't feel like you have a voice in pride, right? Um, you know, Playing tug of war does no one any good. We just pull the rope back and forth, but it's let go of the rope and, you know, liberate yourself and create, be in a space of creation. Because there is someone here in the world that needs what you are going to create. Even if it's not thousands of people, it might just be 10 other people whatever. It might be thousands of people, but they might want that event that is in Wissahickon Park. They might want that event that is, a basement party, like a throwback dollar party. They might want that event that's in Clark Park or in Cobb's Creek. They might want that and need that to be created. They don't know how, and they don't know that somebody else agrees with them. And it's not in competition with me to do that. The more the merrier. And I think that's what Pride is about. It's about people staying in a space of creation, putting together their labor and work behind their wishes and their beliefs, and really making see the kind of community that they want and believe that is necessary. And that means, like, hey, if you're going to build a Pride commune, I applaud that, right? I'll try to do my best to get resources and food over to you. Like, whatever it is that you think is radical, that's going to push the edge, that's going to get people to see, affirm, and lift up people that are marginalized on these days during these hours. It's only 7 hours, right? It's not even a day. It's 7 hours out of a year, right? If that's what you want to do, I celebrate you celebrating that. And I think the spirit of it, of Pride, being, for at least for me, being one that's born out of love and appreciation and affirmation and celebration, it doesn't allot me a lot of space to be resentful towards how other people want to enjoy their Pride Day. Like I think I shared earlier, someone had said, it was on a TikTok, and the guy was like, "There's so much sex at Pride," right? And he was like on a TikTok with his shirt off too. I was like, "Come on," right? He was thirst trapping on about like too much sex and talking about how it's too much and virtue signaling to the high heavens. Like, I mean, it was like Sunday afternoon, high noon church, and I was watching this TikTok on like a Wednesday evening, right? And like he was saying that, and it like occurred to me, it was like, that's just so the antithesis of what at least I historically believe that Pride was about. Pride to me was about, take your shirt off if you want to take your shirt off. Dance if you want to dance. You don't know how to sing, so what? Go sing, right? It was about that, and really having a platform that day to say what you feel, cry out if need be. Do whatever it is that day that you do not feel liberated any other day to do. And do it safely, do it in support of others. Um, it's celebrating Pride isn't necessarily ego driven thing. It's symbiotic, right? So it's like, in part, celebrate yourself, lift up, sing. If you want to sing, if you want to be this, if you want to, like, yes, it's in part that, but it's also really, if you're doing an action, let it be in service of others, right? If you are dressing, if you are, that's your first day of affirming yourself, then that's a very personal thing. No one can tell you how to do that. But if you're like, hey, everyone, this is how you affirm yourselves, and it's a directive giving out to community, then you probably need to talk to others to make sure that, they're on board with what you're saying, if you're saying that it's for community. And for me, like I said, I'm like, this implicitly benefits community, but really it's an open valve, that people pour things into, and it pours back out to the community, right? It's just a valve. So it's not necessarily, for me, a stagnant event that will be antiquated and live on as Pride of 2004. I don't know. Like, it's going to look different in 2030. Pride is going to look different. I don't know if I'll be producing in 2030. I mean, I don't know. I hope so. I like it, but like, I don't. I can't tell people what Pride is going to look like in 2030. I can hope that it's this other thing or that other thing, but maybe Pride in 2030 has like, there's like 10 Prides on the same day all around the city in different neighborhoods. And if that happens, we won. You know, listen, when the day that they say that there's like, child, there's a pride in West Philly, there's a pride on Baltimore Avenue, there's a pride, and like this, the second that that starts happening, like I'm gonna be like, well, then can I stop so I can go to Pride in Philly again? Like, can I stop to enjoy Pride in Philly again? I've been to one since before the pandemic, right? That I wasn't actually working, so um and I miss it. I want to experience what I created too, right? And but no, I also, I that day that like we're going, like there's so many events this weekend, I can't even breathe. I can't even hit them all. There's so many events this month that I can't breathe. I can't even hit them all. Throughout the summer, I can't do enough. There's too much to do. The day that that happens, and people, I'm like, we win, we win, and I, that's what I hope. That's what I hope happens. I hope that Pride expands to be Philly Pride 365, 365 days of the year, right? I hope that it expands that way so people kind of like have events and they call it Pride. It's not patented, right? Like, if someone's like, this is Pride 2024, and it's like September, then guess what it is? Pride 2024. You know, that's what this is about. It's not about ownership. It's about, sharing. It's about creation. It's about art. It's about affirmation. It's about so many things. And none of those things to me say domination, ownership, or punishment. Philly Pride 365 is born out of I was like, we should have Pride every day of the year. But this year's theme for Pride is Be You. And that really it kind of was like, I was like, be you, right? But then it's now like, it's now again another word, that's another phrase that's so broad. So I'm like, oh, be you. What does it mean to me to be you? And it's like, it means so many things. Like, and I think people, I hope, this month, people really, what does it mean to be you? Like, it's like, you know, and when you say those words, if you're like, be you, be a space of love, are you that every day? Are you pursuing that every day? Be you, be free. Are you pursuing your liberation every day? What does that look like? Because it's be, which means it's a state of being, right? Not, it's something that you have to pursue every day. And I know, like, you know, my partner likes to tell me all the time that you don't ever capture or have integrity. It's just something that you pursue every day, right? Because every different instance brings a new challenge in which you have to operate from a basis of integrity. You don't just have it perpetually for the rest of your life because you did one thing cool or one thing right. It's something that you have to recreate each time a new challenge steps your way or a new opportunity steps your way. And that's, to me, when I say be you, it's like, no, I have to recreate that every day. I wake up in the morning and I have to check in with myself, and throughout the day, checking in with myself. Who am I? Reminding myself who I am in this world, and sometimes that who I am seems so distant from what I imagine myself to be at the age of 42. But, this is who I am in 2024. And I would wager to guess, just like Pride, I'll be evolving as well.
And connecting it back to the tarot, strength in reverse, typically this card is, a call to action, signaling that we're courageous, we're strong, we're excited about progressing and moving forward. But when we draw this card in reverse, it is indicating that there's some apprehension there, that we may be doubting ourselves. So we should take some time to reflect and re-energize ourselves and know that we do have the strength to achieve and persevere. And despite some of the discourse and especially the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation going on, we should still feel the courage to be ourselves authentically and show up authentically, not just at Pride events one day out of a year or 1 month out of the year, but all year round, all 365 days. And remember, strength is the number 8 in the major arcana, and 8 is very similar to the infinity symbol, which we do see on this card. So it's a reminder that our energy, our magic, our strength, our power is constantly flowing. And we need to trust ourselves because we are stronger than we think we are. And Tyrell, thank you so much for joining today. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing all the great work you're doing. For all the listeners out there, can you tell them where they can connect with you, where they can learn more, especially if they want to get involved with Galaei?
Yes. So our website is www.galaeiqtbipoc.org. There you can engage with any number of programs that we have on the website. Our Galaei socials are Galaei QT BIPOC on Facebook and as well as Instagram. Galaei Philly on Twitter or X. And also Philly Pride 365. It's phillypride365.org. There you can register for tables. You can register to vend. You can buy tickets to come on to our BU talent show, which is actually this weekend. And you can find any number of ways to get involved. Even if this, if it's not for Pride, there's also National Coming Out Day that we run festivities for, which we have the BU, I'm sorry, not BU, but we have the Philly Pride 365 Pride Parade for National Coming Out Day in October. And that also includes a Black Party as well. So there's things to register on there for that. And also if there's a cost barrier, I tell people this all the time, reach out to me directly. My email is listed there. I have not 1,001 slots, but I usually have spaces that I can like go and lay things over just so that way we can have, especially small businesses that are just trying to get off the ground or trying to recover. We want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do that, especially when they're queer or trans run. So, yeah. And our socials for Philly Pride 365 are Philly Pride 365 at Facebook or Instagram as well.
And I'll be sure to include all that in the show notes. And as always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Greatly appreciate that. If you have any questions for myself or for Tyrell, you can send them to rob@ajadagay.com. You can also connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, and YouTube at @ajadagaypod. You can follow me personally, Rob Lovelace, on Instagram at Rob_Lovelace. Also, don't forget to check out the website, ajadagay.com, for more information on Tyrell, episode resources, links to merchandise and social, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling generous, you can also support the podcast on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That gets you episodes ad-free a day early and monthly bonus episodes signing up at any tier there. And if you'd rather do a one-time donation, you can also do so through Buy Me a Coffee. Both of those are at @ajadagaypod. And remember, every day is all we have, so you got to make your own happiness. Bye.